Hi friends. This is a serious one. I hope you're all okay. I know some of you will be panicking, but hopefully this video can help. This is a preview clip from a full-length episode of the Daily Switch 2 podcast. The full episode covers all of the official accessories and control options for the Nintendo Switch 2, as well as some options from some other companies. And it's currently in the process of rendering and uploading. But that will take quite a few hours, so I'm uploading this section on the Joycons early as an emergency PSA. Many people online right now, as I'm recording this, are talking about Joycon Drift, and we are hearing a ton of reports of people saying that they are experiencing drift on their launch week Switch 2s. I'm here to tell you not to panic quite yet. It's not as big an issue as it might first appear, and if you have bought a Switch and your sticks do appear to be drifting, I've got the probable easy fix for you. If you're in full panic mode and you want to skip straight to that part, I completely understand. I've put timestamps in the description and in the pinned comment, and I genuinely hope it helps you. Good luck. But for those who just want an overview of the Joycons and a full discussion of this issue and the nuances surrounding it, I hope that you enjoy the clip. And if you do, the full episode will be available on Spotify and YouTube in a few hours. Link to find everything and support my work at linktree/dailyswitch2. That's LINK/dailyswitch2. Thank you. So, Joycons. I talked about my first impressions of the Joycons in a previous episode where we were unboxing the system, taking them out, holding them in our hands for the first time, and how they are attached and everything like that. But just to briefly catch you up on my first impression opinions, I definitely prefer these Joycon 2s to the Switch 1 Joycons. They're larger and therefore more comfortable. The sticks are a significant improvement, although drift ? We'll get onto that in a minute. The buttons much better. They're bigger and clickier, and the attachment method with the magnets where it attaches to the system, so much better, so much more convincing than the kind of slidey in, never stayed quite still when you wanted it to flex a bit rail system of the Switch 1. Yeah, the magnet system, much better. When the Switch is together in portable mode with the Joy-Cons attached on either side, it feels like a solid unit. Although, as I mentioned before, I would warn against holding it by just one Joy-Con. For example, I mentioned an example of if someone came into the room while you were playing and they offered you a beer or a slice of pizza or whatever, and you were holding it in two hands and you let go with your right hand to grab the beer. Be pretty careful, because if you're at the wrong angle, because it's such a convincing effect that you might forget that the Joy-Cons are actually detachable, and while the magnets are strong, you don't want to be waving it around by just one Joy-Con. That said, though, it's still much better than the rail system before, and the Joy-Cons themselves more comfortable. I've never really been the biggest fan of Joy-Cons. I mentioned this in another episode, but frankly, I dislike the feel of the Joycon 1 so much that I actually bought a Switch Lite to use in portable mode, and I only use my Switch 1 in docked mode. Even the improved screen of the Switch OLED could not make me move from my Switch Lite because, again, the Switch Lite obviously doesn't have Joy-Cons because it doesn't do the switching. It's a Switch with no switch, which is strange. But because of that, it's one solid unit. It's all together. And it just, to me, it feels better in the hand. It doesn't flex. It doesn't have that kind of looseness, random things MacGyvered on the side of a generic tablet that I felt the Switch 1 design had. I'm sure many of you love the Switch 1 design and are getting angry at me for saying that. I'm sorry, I'm not a fanboy, huge lifelong fan of Nintendo, but if there's something that I don't like, as I mentioned in the introduction, this is not an official Nintendo podcast where we say everything about Nintendo is good. But again, I'm pointing out a negative with the Switch 1 and saying it's much, much, much better with the Switch 2. But with the Joy-Cons in general, with the Switch 1, as I said, I didn't really like the feel of the Joy-Cons. I didn't like how they attached, and I really wasn't a fan of using them separate and sideways. You know, like when they say, oh, you can turn the left and right Joy-Cons into two controllers, so you can have multiplayer without carrying a separate Yeah, you can, in theory, but for me, it's extremely uncomfortable, and especially the right Joy-Con, the stick ends up being in the middle of the controller when you hold it sideways. It's just weird. That issue still exists with the Switch 2 Joy-Cons. However, I will say, because they're bigger, because the buttons are bigger, because the sticks are bigger, and also because they really improved what are the shoulder buttons in inverted commas when you put the Joy-Cons sideways. I can see me potentially being more willing to use them like that and not cringing quite as much if somebody passes me one and expects me to use it. But still, I can see myself kind of jumping towards a Pro Controller or another option. But as I said, we'll get into the Pro Controller later because it's not quite as simple as that. The rails that attach, or the strap that attach, I said before that I never really saw the point in these because it's two extra bits of plastic that you have to kind of carry around with you, and it takes away from the neat, oh, it's an all-in-one unit, and then you can take the controllers off if you want to. Yeah, well, it's not an all-in-one unit if you've got to then carry these little fiddly straps around, and I said it's quite likely that you're going to lose them or you're going to forget to bring them with you. That's still a problem here. However, because of the Joy-Con to mouse mode, maybe they're more essential than they were before. I mean, not essential, but more useful, because I can imagine in mouse mode, maybe the Joy-Con aren't going to be as comfortable, or maybe they're going to grip a bit to whatever you're using the mouse in inverted commas on. Mouse mode is something that I'm not really going to get into here because I haven't personally played any games that require mouse mode yet. I will say it's a neat idea. It definitely opens up some cool gameplay ideas. Initially, I was just like, oh, okay, we're just going to get more PC ports, and I don't really care about that because I'm a PC gamer as well as a Nintendo gamer anyway. So if there was something that required a mouse, I'll just play it on my PC or my laptop. But then I saw the game with the wheelchair basketball and using kind of two mice at once and combining the motion control with the mouse movement. And I thought, oh, you know what? Actually, yeah, there could be some fun implementations of this mouse mode. It's probably going to be gimmicky, and like most Nintendo gimmicks, it's probably going to be underused, just as the gamepad was. I mean, I'm thinking specifically of how long it took for Star Fox Zero to come out, and then when it did, it didn't really work as a proof of concept for what Miyamoto was envisioning in the first place with the gamepad. But also things like the Wiimote. Over time, it just wasn't used very much, was it? It was used less and less. Same with the 3D of the 3DS. I mean, by the end of the 3DS's life, even first-party Nintendo games were being released without bothering to have a 3D mode in them. Often these kind of gimmicks end up being just that. It remains to be seen whether there is an essential mouse mode game that comes out. But I'm definitely open to it. I think it's a cool idea. And the rails, while I still think they're an awkward solution very much in inverted commas. They are better than the rails on the Joycon 1, and certainly the shoulder buttons are more comfortable and bigger and better placed, and especially once you put the rails on. And I like the fact that the rails add a bit of color and match to the colored ring around the analog stick. And I guess I should mention, again, I mentioned this in my first impressions, but I do think it's a bit classier the way that the Joycon 2s come in the kind of matching grey, dark grey, black, whatever, to match the body, but you get the splash of unmatched color of the Joycon 1s with the rings around the analog stick, the kind of blue and red in the Nintendo Classic style. For me, it might be a little less cool to some people, but for me, it gives a kind of classier look. And also, you don't have that sense of you're staring at the screen when you're in portable mode, and you have a kind of weird imbalance where the left and the right colors don't match. That always kind of bothered me, having that in my periphery vision. So that's fixed now. I'm sure we will get different color Joycon 2 variations over time, but I hope that when we do, I hope that they release them in matching colors, not unmatching like with the color variations for the Switch 1, because I've got to say that actually did put me off buying color variations of the Joycon for the Switch 1. Obviously, or at least you'd hope, obviously, the Joycon 2 have pretty much all the functionality of the Joycon 1. I suppose the only thing is, because they're a different size, they won't fit into Joycon 1 accessories, like the wheel, if anybody uses the wheel. We'll get onto that. Zapper and, things like... what was it? The cardboard stuff. Nintendo LABO. Yeah, that was a cool idea that then kind of instantly disappeared, didn't it? Yeah, it's a shame. The Joycon 2s won't work with Nintendo LABO if you're one of the tiny fraction of people that still care about Nintendo LABO nowadays. But one area that has been supposedly upgraded is the rumble features, or the what do people call it nowadays? The haptics. Is that the word that techie people use? Haptics. What was called HD Rumble with the Switch, kind of gimmicky name, but with the Switch, HD Rumble. And I guess if it's improved, maybe now it's 4K Rumble or HDR Rumble. AI enhanced Rumble, whatever the current buzzwords are. Look, I don't really care about Rumble. I was there at the start of Rumble. I bought Lilac Wars, which, for those who don't know, is the European name for Star Fox 64, and it came with the very first Rumble pack for the Nintendo 64, and I remember reading in all the magazines about how amazing it was, and I was not impressed. I was impressed with the game. I loved the game, but I just thought, okay, so sometimes my controller vibrates. I don't really see how this is immersive, but I know that some people like it. I've got to say it became slightly more interesting over time with what Sony implemented with DualShock. A lot of people don't know, but if you were there at the time, you might remember there was a dual analog controller for the PlayStation 1 before the DualShock, just very, very briefly. So it had dual analog sticks and slightly longer handles, but no rumble functionality or no force feedback. Not that it's proper force feedback anyway, because force feedback would actually wrestle with the stick while you were playing it rather than just vibrating in your hand. But by adding 2 motors, you could do some slightly cooler stuff. And of course, nowadays Nintendo and Xbox, everybody is caught up, and it slightly iteratively improves each generation. And Nintendo made a big deal with the Switch 1 of HD Rumble, supposedly being able to recreate crazy mind tricks to make you feel like you're holding a ball in a cup, or you know, I, I'm laughing because even at the time, watching those initial like trailers for 1-2 Switch, I was thinking this doesn't look fun, and this looks like a weird tech demo, and I hope it's free. And then they ended up charging full price for it, and at the time I thought full price for 1-2 Switch was an absolute scandal. For me, it should have been free included with the Switch One, and I'm laughing to myself now because that was nothing compared to the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, and I am not paying money for Welcome Tour. I'm sorry. We will talk about it in another video very briefly because I'm going to be covering the entire launch lineup, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to buy it just to feel the supposedly improved HD rumble and have an interactive manual. I'm not going to encourage that. Sure, it's not expensive. I think it's like $10, but that's beside the point. It should have been free. If Sony can include Astro's frickin' Playroom for free, which is an incredible game. I mean, it's short, but it's almost a system seller by itself, isn't it? What are Nintendo doing? Nickel and diming for the Welcome Tour. But we're meant to be talking about the Joy-Cons, but as I say, really the only thing that would have probably fully shown off exactly how supposedly incredible this new Rumble feature would be the Welcome Tour, I imagine. But again, just like with 1-2 Switch and the Switch One, the most impressive use of HD Rumble was probably 1-2 Switch, and it was a tech demo, and then it was never really used in games. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, if there were games that you feel were massively enhanced by HD Rumble, more so than just vibrating a little bit, when you're speeding up in a car or when you get shot, more so that would have not been possible on previous implementations of Rumble. I don't know. I'm interested. I genuinely am interested if some people think HD Rumble is the reason to buy a Switch, and therefore the new version will be the reason to buy Switch 2. For me, it's not important, but it's nice to have, and I'm told that it's an improvement, so I'm going to take their word for it. Now, here is the big one. Obviously, the main problem with the Joy-Cons on the Nintendo Switch One, and the main problems with the Nintendo Switch One in general, were the Joy-Cons drifting. It's the big scandal. I say scandal because if you follow the news, I mean, Nintendo didn't even admit officially that it was a problem, because if they'd have officially admitted it was a problem, they would have been hit with even bigger lawsuits than they already had. But they did settle a lot of lawsuits out of court, and they did implement a system whereby when your Joy-Cons inevitably drifted, they would get replaced. Obviously, for me as a collector, I've mentioned that I'm a collector who likes to still play systems from many, many, many years ago. I'm still playing NES and Super Nintendo, and I worry about that with the Joy-Cons of, when they eventually break. In the future, we won't be able to replace them, will we? But hopefully the community will save the day, as they always seem to, and will invent, drop-in replacements, as they have done for N64 controller sticks. Well done, community. But if you've been living under a rock and somehow you don't know what is Joy-Con drift, stick drift in general is something which most modern controllers will suffer from. Basically, it means where the analog sticks no longer stay centered as far as the system is concerned, and even when you're not touching the analog sticks, the system thinks that you're pressing in a certain direction. And of course, the worse that gets, the more impossible it becomes to play the game, because you're always veering off in a direction that you're not pressing, or you're wrestling with it. If, say, your stick is drifting left and you want to turn right, you'll have to really hold it to the right, and if you want to go straight, you'll have to hold it kind of halfway to the right. Does that make sense? Stick drift is an absolute nightmare. It's something which can happen with PlayStation and Xbox controls, but honestly, it's pretty rare. Whereas with the Joy-Cons on the Nintendo Switch 1, it started happening more and more and more often, to the point that it became a bit of an epidemic. And it seems almost everybody who had a launch model Nintendo Switch 1 or a model that came out really in the first maybe 2 years of the system, pretty much they had to replace their Joy-Cons. And I know many people who've had to buy multiple pairs of Joy-Cons for their children. For me personally, as I said, I don't really like the Joy-Cons, so I didn't use them very much. So I only ever had one pair that went a bit squiff, but I didn't really care, and I just didn't replace them after that point, because, as I say, I use my Switch 1 in docked mode, and I use the Switch Lite for handheld play, and touch wood, touche en bois, as my French friends say, my Switch Lite has not drifted, although the technology for the sticks is it works in the same way as within the Joy-Cons, so maybe it will. But I think, thankfully, from this moment on, I'll be using my Switch 2 for portable play instead of my Switch Lite. So my Switch Lite can happily retire knowing that it never drifted. So this is wonderful. But yeah, Joycon Drift was a big issue for the Nintendo Switch 1 and a big scandal for Nintendo. Because, I mean, Joy-Cons are not cheap. And we'll get into that with the Joy-Cons too, because they're even less cheap. This will be a recurring theme in this video with all the accessories. But I don't want to dwell on costs, but if you're releasing a good product that will last, okay, maybe it's worth the price, but you know, when you're releasing a premium product, for me, the Switch Joy-Cons were always overpriced, especially considering how breakable they were, and they almost seemed to come with an expiry date, although they did improve over time, and we'll get to that. But at the price, it really made it an issue. They weren't... These should not be disposable items or items that you're expecting to regularly replace. These should be, you buy your system, they're an integral part of the system, and unless, you know, you're really rough with them, you shouldn't be expecting to have to regularly replace them, and certainly not at the cost, not the cost that they are. But that was the problem with the Switch 1 Joy-Cons. The Switch 2 Joy-Cons, they're probably gonna have the same problem, question mark, in parentheses, inverted commas, maybe, because people have done teardowns on these Joy-Con 2s already, and we can see that the technology of how these sticks work, the mechanism for how it registers the analog inputs, is basically the same as the Nintendo Switch 1 Joy-Cons. But I will say, the problem with the sticks on the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons did improve over time. As the new models came out, Nintendo implemented small changes without ever officially mentioning that they'd made the changes, because that would be admitting that there was a fault with the original design, and that would open them up to even more lawsuits. But the design did change very slightly over time, and seemingly the manufacturing process, maybe they cared a little bit more, and they put a bit more effort into making sure that they were extremely strong, because people who bought later models of the Switch 1, I think starting with the Mario Red bundle, and certainly by the time we got to the OLED models, the Joy-Cons, although Nintendo will tell you, oh no, they're identical, we didn't change anything, seemingly, anecdotally, the Joy-Cons became better quality and didn't break as often. So hopefully that continues with the Switch 2 Joy-Cons. The Switch 2 Joy-Cons, they do still have the same technology, so they are fallible to the same stick drifting potentially. But hopefully they've managed to learn from the lessons that they did with the Switch 1 Joy-Cons, and although they can't possibly have fixed it completely, hopefully the situation will be a lot better. Here's the disappointing thing. They could have fixed the problem completely, right? We have fixed this. In fact, again, not to get into console wars territory, but Sega fixed this back with the Dreamcast in 1999. 26 years ago. The analog stick on the Sega Dreamcast used Hall effect sensors. Hall effect analog sticks are included in pretty much every premium version of a modern controller, including the premium versions of the Xbox and PlayStation 5 controllers. Admittedly, those are very expensive controllers, but I believe they come with Hall effects. And it's just a different technology of how you read the analog inputs, and it should have been included with the Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Cons to make sure that they can never drift. They can never possibly drift. Hall effect sticks can't possibly drift because of how they work. And if I'm wrong with that, let me know in the comments. But I believe because of the way they work, they can't drift. And why didn't Nintendo include that? Maybe as a cost-cutting measure? If it was as a cost-cutting measure, then cynical face on. Like the way when I was talking about the Joy-Con grip and the dock, they really kind of cheaped out with certain aspects. And if they also cheaped out with the analog sticks on the Joy-Con 2, then obviously I don't approve of that. But it could be, to be fair to Nintendo, it could be that Hall effect analog sticks would not work with the magnetic attachment ? It's certainly possible that because of the way that Hall effect sticks work, strong magnets nearby would affect the electronics. So it's possible that Hall effect sticks wouldn't have been possible because of the magnetic attachment. But I would argue if that's the case, Nintendo, if I was Nintendo, I would have prioritized the Hall effect sticks and I would have not used magnets. I would have used another attaching mechanism. I would have still kept the really nice kind of snug method of how the rather than sliding on with a rail, they actually clip into the side of the tablet. I would have still kept that, but rather than using a magnet to hold them in place, I would have maybe had an actual physical clip. And frankly, as long as it was smooth enough and they didn't rattle around, I would have actually preferred that, because then you wouldn't have the problem that I mentioned of if somebody comes in and offers you a pizza or offers you a beer, they could fly out of your hands. But Nintendo didn't go with that method, and they didn't go with Hall effect sticks, so therefore we might eventually see drift rearing its ugly head. Now, you may have seen online people claiming already that they are experiencing stick drift with the Joy-Con 2, with the Switch 2. Oh my god, I've just bought a brand new Switch 2 and it's come with drifting sticks out of the box. I am skeptical about that. I don't know. It's possible. But if you wanted to clickbait and get many hits and many views, this is something that people are really worried about, really paranoid about. So it would be very, very easy to lie and say that you have stick drift on your Nintendo Switch 2 and get a whole load of clickbaity clicks. And, go ahead, do your thing. I've been clickbaiting with some of my clips and shorts. You have to game the algorithm any way you can. But don't lie. Don't actively lie to make Nintendo look worse than they already are. There's plenty to moan about legitimately with the Switch 2 and Mario Kart World, and there's plenty of things that you can legitimately moan about without making up problems. But there has been a large amount of people saying that they are experiencing drift, and I think they're doing it in good faith because they think that they are. They think they're genuinely experiencing drift. And here's the thing. This is important. You may experience this yourself. Most people buying the Nintendo Switch 2 on launch will be buying it with Mario Kart. In fact, probably only with Mario Kart. I imagine for many people, especially because of the cost, they will only buy the bundle with Mario Kart, and for a long while that'll be the only game that they have. And many people playing Mario Kart are feeling like they're experiencing stick drift because they're not touching the stick and they are veering off to the left or veering off to the right. Here's the thing. Many people experiencing this, it's not because they're experiencing stick drift, it's because they have tilt controls turned on. There is a gyro sensor in the Joy-Cons, and you can control Mario Kart using tilt controls, like with the Wii, where you could put it in a wheel, and you put the Wiimote in a wheel, and you tilt it side to side. That feature is included in Mario Kart World. Crazy as many people may think, I think the majority of people would assume that those kind of controls died out with the Wii more than 10 years ago. Way more than 10 years ago. But no, it was popular enough that Nintendo still supports motion tilt controls, and they're even releasing a brand new wheel accessory for the Joy-Con 2, and we'll get into that in a minute. And I mean, I think it's silly, but it exists if you want it as an option, and I'm sure some people do, and I don't want to remove accessibility. If it's your jam, if you like using the wheel controller, great, go for it. But it has caused a huge problem with people knocking on the tilt controls or not realizing that they've got tilt controls turned on and thinking that their sticks are drifting. And so there's been literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people on social media going, oh my god, I've just bought a Switch 2 and it was really expensive and it's drifting already. What am I going to do? Crying face emoji, crying face emoji. No. Check to see whether you've got tilt controls turned on in Mario Kart. And, are your sticks drifting when you're not playing Mario Kart? Probably not. You've probably just got the tilt controls turned on. Turn them off. Public service announcement. But again, the way I just said that, I don't want to sound judgmental. No, this is a very, very easy mistake to make. And it's entirely Nintendo's fault for not making it obvious that you have tilt controls on. But also, people wouldn't be so paranoid and instantly panicking and flying off the handle when they experience what they believe to be drift if it weren't for Joycon Drift being such a huge problem with Switch 1 and Nintendo being so rubbish and cagey about dealing with the issue, and also without them refusing to include Hall effect with the Joycon 2. So, is stick drift a big problem immediately right now? I don't believe so. I mean, if you are genuinely experiencing stick drift, let me know in the comments, because that is a major problem. But I think a lot of the people claiming that they're having stick drift are just either clickbaiting or they're making a mistake. Then they're understandably mistaking weird tilt controls for drifting. But will it be a problem in the future? Almost certainly, yes. I hate to say that. I really hate to say that, because as I said in my first impressions video, I actually really like the Joycon 2s. I think they're a massive improvement over the Joycon 1, but they aren't perfect. I mean, they aren't perfect because they've got this technology which is prone to drifting over time. And, with any system, you could say, okay, controllers are a replaceable thing, right? I remember my very first console was a Sega Master System, and I loved that thing, and I played it so much that eventually the D-pad started to get unresponsive, and one of the buttons started getting a little bit sticky, because I just played it so much. I played it for hundreds of hours. And fair enough. So I went out and just bought another controller. And back then, I remember the controller, it cost me $9.99. And as a kid with my pocket money, I felt slightly annoyed that I wasn't using that money to buy a new game and I had to buy a new controller instead. But you know what? It was a sacrifice I was willing to make because I was aware, fair dues, I've used this controller for thousands of hours and I've hit these buttons thousands of times. I've got to say, though, with a portable system, not so much. Because obviously, I mean, I'm thinking about, when you think about portable systems, obviously you think about Nintendo first, with all of the Game Boy line and the DS's and everything. But also, even with the PSP and the PSP Vita and the Sega Game Gear, the Atari Lynx, the Neo Geo Pocket Color. I'm just trying to think of every handheld console I've ever had. Even the Supervisions. I briefly mentioned Supervisions in an earlier episode. Most people won't know what they are. Supervisions were a DMG Game Boy ripoff from Taiwan at a budget price. They were low quality ripoffs of the DMG. However, ironically, in some ways, they predicted the Nintendo Switch because they had features of the eventual Nintendo Switch, because you could get a dock for the Supervision, or for one model of the Supervision, so it would plug into the TV, and also with another model of the Supervision, because there were three models of it in all. With another model of the Supervision, it actually had the D-pad that the Joycons now have, with D-pad very much in inverted commas, where it uses 4 small circular buttons instead of a traditional cross. That actually was pioneered in inverted commas. I mean, I hate it, but it was pioneered in inverted commas by the Supervision, which is funny because the Supervision in itself was a Nintendo ripoff. But anyway, the reason why I mention that is even the Supervision, which was a budget system from Taiwan in the 90s, even that, and all of my models of the Game Boy and every other handheld console I've had, I've never had the controls break, because the controls are an integral part of the system. So it's important that they are super high quality, because they can't be easily replaced. You basically, if your controls break, you have to buy a new system. Now, with the Switch, if the controls break, you don't have to buy a new system, you just buy new Joy-Cons. But Nintendo keeps insisting that the Switch and the Switch 2 are not portable systems. They are full-fat home consoles that just happen to also be portable in one of the 3 modes that you can use them in. I've already made clear that I think that that's a cop-out. The Switch is a portable system which happens to just also be playable in tabletop mode and on a TV in docked. It's not a home console first, because if it was, they would be competing closer on technology with the Xbox and the PlayStation range. It's not. It's portable tech. It's using mobile phone and tablet tech. So why aren't the built-in controls, built-in inverted commas, why aren't the included default controls as high quality as on previous Nintendo systems? Is it planned obsolescence? Is it so that Nintendo can sell you more Joy-Cons down the line? That's a very cynical way to look at it, but frankly, some of the decisions that Nintendo has made leads us to being cynical, like the aforementioned welcome tour being charged for, and the prices of some of these accessories. I don't know. So when we talk about the cost to replace them, $95. $95. I've got to take a pause there. $95. That is twice what I paid for my DMG Game Boy back in the 90s. I know we've got, inflation, but actually that means that with inflation included, the DMG should have been more expensive, not less. Jesus, $95 for a pair of Joycon, and I'm putting pair in inverted commas because pair makes it sound like it's two controllers. Yes, technically it's two controllers if you turn them on the side and use them, but you can't control every game like that, and that's not how the majority of people are going to play the Switch. The majority of the time they're going to use it portable with both Joy-Cons attached, so it's just essentially it controls for one player, not two, despite what Nintendo wants to say. So it's $95 for your controls. Now, I know they're included when you buy the system. Absolutely. Of course. But for multiplayer, people are going to want to maybe buy more? I actually think there's better options, but I think there's a lot of people that just by default, a lot of parents who are going to think, wow, I've got more than one kid. They want to play multiplayer. They want to have their friends around. I'm going to have to buy more Joy-Cons. And they don't realize that the other options exist. $95. When they were announced, they were announced at $90, and I already thought that $90 was extortionate. But then, almost immediately after, I think 2 days after releasing the price, they started talking about, the tariffs with the American political system. The tariffs mean that we have to raise the price of everything. And, let's not get into the political side of things, but personally, I think they used it as an excuse to raise the price of things that they didn't need to raise the price of. Yes, maybe the price of the console itself needed to go up, and charitably, maybe the Joy-Cons themselves, because they have certain technology in them which comes from various different countries, including India for manufacturing and Taiwan or China or both. If you live in China and you're offended that I just separated Taiwan and China, I'm sorry. # not a political podcast. But $95 for a pair of Joy-Con. I'm sorry. Oh, but now they have a C button. Totally worth it. We've got a C button included. That is a feature that totally makes it worth paying the extra. I'm joking because as I think I've made clear previously, I don't use online functions really, especially I'm not going to be using social media and sharing, and I'm not really interested in the webcam. We'll get onto that later. So the chat functions are essentially useless for me, so I'm not going to use the C button. And I hate the fact that it's called a C button. Why couldn't it just have like a logo that looks like a little face or something for chatting, or I don't know, or I hate the fact that it's called the C button because Nintendo had already established C buttons way back in the Nintendo 64. The C buttons were the camera buttons. The little yellow buttons for controlling the camera, what essentially later on became the analog stick, and then you had the C stick on the Nintendo GameCube. See, it all made sense, and it was following, and then suddenly, Nintendo in their infinite wisdom wants to change the definition of what the C stands for. No, I'm not buying it, Nintendo. This is not a C button, it's a social media button, and I don't like it. Old man yelling at clouds, just like the last episode. But, okay, Joy-Cons, $95 a pair. They're probably going to drift eventually, but at least you get them with the console in the first place. So hopefully, if you're just buying it yourself, you're wanting to play single player, or for multiplayer, you're going to use other options, you don't have to worry about the cost. But eventually, when you have to replace them or when you want to buy more, the cost is pretty extortionate, isn't it? To go... I mean, I know it was many, many years ago, but $10 for a new controller back when I first started gaming, it felt expensive back then, but I was happy to pay it because it felt like value for money. $95. I don't feel there's $95 worth of tech inside these Joy-Cons. It's essentially Look, if you think I'm wrong, go on AliExpress right now and search for mobile phone parts, including IR sensors, gyro controls. There's a few pence worth of tech inside these Joy-Cons. Charitably, it costs Nintendo, including labor, $10 to make a pair, and then maybe $5 for the packaging and a combined cost for shipping to retailers. They are making a huge markup on these $95 Joy-Cons. Do not get it twisted. Now, some people will say, but Sam, you can put them in the Joy-Con grip and they double up as a Pro controller. So you don't need to buy a Pro controller because you can just put them in the grip. And I talked about this in my first impressions video. The grip, it's okay, but it should have been a charging grip. For the premium price and the fact that supposedly this system is an improvement over the last system, it should have been a charging grip. And okay, this is an accessories video. Let's talk about it. You can buy a charging grip. So Nintendo obviously had the idea, knows that charging grips are a thing, knows that people might want them, knows that a charging grip would be better. But no, why would we include that with the system when you buy it? No, we're going to charge $40 for a charging grip. $40. When, as I said in my first impressions video, if you want to modify your grip yourself with a Dremel and buying parts online, it would probably cost you $2. $2 to upgrade your grip to a charging grip. $40. The charging grip is better than the standard grip. But please don't encourage them. Please don't encourage them. Use another solution and use a Pro controller instead. But maybe not the Switch 2 Pro controller. And we're going to get into that. It's not the slam dunk that you might think. We'll get into that later in the video. Well, that was funny / sad / informative / stupid, wasn't it? Feel free to mentally redact to make that make sense with the clip that you just heard. I don't know what it was. I'm just recording a bumper. But if you enjoyed the clip, please give it a like. If you'd like to hear more, click subscribe, and you can find all the ways to listen to and support the full daily podcast at linktree/dailyswitch2. That's linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. Let's go! Did I sound like I mean that? I do. I really do.